Good to see everybody on. My name is Kevin Kotchak. I'm the founder and CEO of Chemical Q Device, here for Thursday, May 9th, 2024, discussion 134. So this is going to talk about cancer drug discovery AI agentic workflows. And what you see here is what some are calling it's the next progression of AI, beyond just using Gen AI. So this number 4 here, retrieval augmented generation fine tuning. And then now, along with data sets, being able to read and write at different points, and along with other ML models, right? So and I'll get to some of these kind of like the points that still need developed in the industry, but it's basically this coordinated effort with an AI agent, and the big libraries you'll hear about is LangChain, LangGraph, CrewAI, and some of the Microsoft tools as well. And the gist is basically you have a user prompt, and the AI agent is coordinating this effort to get a better, more informed task or the output behind it. So the way this works in drug discovery is basically this: is you have, the early drug discovery and preclinical phase is shown here, and there's anything from target ID and validation, high throughput screening, just many of the lead generating parts, and then going up to kind of stage 2 would be more like the animal testing, those types of things. And what we see here is basically in 2024, it's been more for this stage 1. So we saw this with a couple of groups last week with somebody they're called ChemCrow, and with Liam, and then also with some LAMM-MIT researchers using these agents for chemical or biochemical type purposes in a more automated workflow. And of course, the FDA oversees this process, and this specific images up top are provided by it's called BioBead, in specific up top there. Okay, so Gen AI will be designing new drugs all of its own in the future. So this article came out not too long ago. It's been updated, I think, at least a couple of times. And who's associated with this is basically you have Eli Lilly, Google DeepMind, and NVIDIA. And this is obviously talking about agents or kind of the increased orchestration with software going on here. And if you know anything about AI, you definitely know Andrew Ng. So his goal for AI agents and this automations is basically this. He says, instead of you prompting AI and it responds in a few seconds, we now see instances where I can tell it, dear AI, please do research for me and write a report. And then it goes off for half an hour and browses the internet, summarizes all these things, and comes back in a half an hour with a report. He says, this is not working as good as I just described it, but it is working much better than 3 months ago. So that was, this is February 2024, and then he's referring back to, obviously, so that'd be November 2023. So it keeps getting better. And there's a lot of good as far as seminars, you can get on YouTube, other sources too. And what this, so Arsenii Shatokh said is basically everything switching from this chatbot mentality to more AI agents, more versatility, more function is basically what they're saying. And he referred to this basically for SaaS platforms, but just imagine this, our typical interactions with just task bots or chatbots being more and more functional, more and more practical. So obviously we're talking about autonomy of AI agents, and for a long time in my understanding is it'll always be employees over AI agents, and then other types of software automations that we've seen. And he says the timing is just right to use AI agents right now. And obviously this usually incorporates some form of a large language model, Gen AI, other types of machine learning, say, that are more kind of specialized than a big model that's more aimed at, taking in user prompts. And he says, what's most important is how many agents you want to create, limit the number of agents, and then in specific, what each agent will do and what tools they will use. So I covered last week this ChemCrow thing that used 18 tools, in this kind of like this automated workflow, this AI agents, user prompt, I want this specific chemical, and it goes all the way and, creates it in this robo reaction by IBM. And he actually says tools are the most important. It's not the AI agents themselves. It's what's, being used along with them. So we see this again. So here's another one. So this was a Sequoia Capital presentation. This is Andrew Ng again, and he's associated with Deep Learning AI and AI Fund. And he says the first 2 steps we have pretty well, right? So this reflection, the tool use, we have robust technology with that. But what needs to get better in this workflow is the planning and the multi-agent collaboration. So, we're talking about, having still a prompt, but it going off, like Andrew said, for half an hour, doing different tasks across the internet and coming back with, say, more reports or more robust is what we see today, which is it's probably going to take more time because hardware is not likely going to go exponential. But it's just, kind of like the advanced workflows that we're seeing. And he said these other things too. He says the set of tasks that AI can do will expand dramatically because of these agentic workflows. And we have to get used to delegating tasks to AI agents and patiently wait for a response. So these are more kind of incorporative kind of things. And like I said, it's still dealing with the internet. And like I said, it's progressively getting bigger, but it's still going to face that kind of time hurdle. And he says fast token generation is important. Generating more tokens, even from a lower quality LLM, can give good results. And obviously, token in this it's a word represented in digits. That's what a token is. He says if you're looking forward to using GPT-5, which isn't even out yet, Claude 4, Gemini 2.0, these are not out yet, on your application, you might already be able to get similar performance with agentic reasoning on an earlier model. So that would be like a GPT 3.5 or 4. And a Gemini 1.5. I'm not sure about the Claude. And Harrison Chain is the he started this startup. I was able to watch one of his kind of interviews along with this specific video. And LangChain is basically this orchestration software. It's associated with LangGraph. And it's a very kind of a moving startup, I would say. So you have the agent in the middle, you have the tools on the left, and obviously you can go far further than these tools: calendar, calculator. The ones that we saw last week with these 18 chem tools were like reaction planner, very more robust tools to work with. And you see their planning here, and reflection he includes, and then these three others: self-critics, chain of thoughts, sub-goal, decomposition. And another pivotal point that he made is with long-term memory here is just imagine having these interactions instead of with a more limited chatbot. Now we're switching over to this term, this natural evolution of it called AI agents, and it being able to recall more and more detail of the previous interactions that you've had with them. So it's a time thing, it's a money thing. So how much memory do you have available to set aside? And basically said that kind of personalized interaction will improve as the long-term memory associated with the agent does too. Now, this is another one. So this is Aritra Sen, and he was talking about LangGraph. Now, if you're brand new to LangChain, this is a good introduction here. So you have your model input output with, the standardized LLM IOs. Now the chains link the output of one LLM call to the input of another LLM. And this kind of reminds me of like tensor networks or other types of graph machine learning. But it's just done with, tool sets that can access other types of machine learning. The memory itself, as I was talking before, longer term memory keeps a higher, historical context, when interacting with a user. And retrieval, so this is RAG, so retrieval augmented generation. So if you're just tuning into LLMs, typically you can't use general LLMs to do good research. You have to use something like fine tuning, which changes the parameters, or RAG in this specific case, which augments the generation of the LLM to give a better output. And you can point it to your specific data set or your specific directory, as opposed to it just looking all across the internet. And then the agent is used as a reasoning engine to determine the action here. Now, as far as oncology and cancer goes, this group here, so this Triomics, I was able to attend this seminar, and it's Surajay Singh, and he's the co-founder of Triomics. And he says a lot with patient trial matching, data curation for tumor registries. And again, this is more Gen AI. And you have to know the Gen AI stuff in order to work with agents, because a lot of times it's like that advanced kind of prompting. You want to get a sentence or two from the user and then output a usable answer. And it goes without saying, there's also another group, NVIDIA, and it's called Hippocratic AI. And they already use agents on their own to answer calls and these types of things. So that's another startup that's interesting too. Now, there's a bunch of these. I'm going to probably focus next week on this specific paper just because it has so much good stuff. It's more focused on GANs and drug discovery. And there's a number of different techniques you could use to get a specific molecule. So if we're talking about lead generation and the better, I showed you on that second slide, the better 10,000 that you start off with, we're more talking about advanced LLMs. In this specific case, they didn't use agentic reasoning, but keep in mind this specific molecule was used with diffusion base, or it's a depiction, which introduces noise in the forward process, the curved arrows, and then aligning data with a Gaussian distribution here too. And it generates the sample from data derived from noise distribution sampling. So this is the output here for this specific diffusion model is what's shown here. And then the next one is you know, this drug discovery today, I actually put a poll up and you can still kind of vote on that. It hasn't closed yet. And it talks about this too, drug discovery today. It's on the LinkedIn. Now there's other people too, these MIT researchers that have used with diffusion generative models. And I've covered this 3-4 weeks ago regarding protein mechanical strength. So say if you want a protein with this mechanical strength, our diffusion model can produce something that's in that vicinity, right? A lot better than, you know, not using some type of, diffusion method. And then also McGill University has also used this too for de novo drug-like molecules. Now, here's the other one. So same molecule. So they're showing this. It's not really accurate to any specific atom, but using transformer decoder only. So decoder only is like Llama-3, ChatGPT, or GPT, and there's encoder, decoder, but in this specific case, it's just looking at decoder. And they say a transformer-based model process begins with start of sequence input into the decoder and generates subsequent tokens until end of sequence is generated. So it's just looking at the next one. So that's what makes it decoder only, like a GPT. And there's been other groups too. So I covered this last week with the LIAC ChemCrow. They actually went with an agentic workflow and GPT. So they used GPT 3 different times. This is OpenAI's. And then also with this LAMM-MIT with MechGPT, they also use agentics. The base papers is not focused on the agentic workflows. So that leads us to the practical use of it all. So I drew here this adenine, and I made the model too, is basically compared to last week's that we saw with phenylalanine, this is a lot more planar. So this goes inside of DNA, and a lot of the drug interactions that, you know, are associated with DNA protein interactions, this is a direct, like, this is one of the pieces that exists inside of all of us. So for instance, if you have this DNA strand, it's going to hydrogen bond to a thymine, so A to T. And, you know, it's important to keep in mind all the fundamentals and the basics that you learned in organic chemistry and biochemistry, or if you took medicinal chemistry, these types of things as well. Now, what was done further that was related to this specific molecule is, if you weren't listening the past couple of weeks, basically Meta AI, which is owned by Facebook, introduced Llama-3. Now, Llama-3 is under the Llama-3 operating license, which is pretty open source. And there's been a lot of developments with it. So I've done some models based on it. Other people, these three, so Gradient AI, Newest Research, and NVIDIA did another fine tuning based off of it and then put their models up as well. Right. So, and then I took it another step further, and then I fine-tuned on my own molecular instructions as well. And I pushed my models up to Hugging Face as well. Now, they all ran about the same, about 600 seconds on an A140 gig, which is kind of like the limit on Colab right now. And the difference was the outputs. So if you're familiar with SMILES, this is called selfies. It's a chemical representation of a molecule. And I simply asked each of them, what is the structure for adenine? You know, and again, it's based on this original mole instructions. And then none of them were able to produce it correctly, but it might be there's very specific things. As I give it this data set that's by mole instructions, and it's specific prompts, and you know, it has to be in a specific format. But anyways, the one that I felt that did the best, that was based on my fine tuning of the Gradient AI model, was this this one here. So it tended to have this verbose selfie structure, which means that it didn't have, I think this is 5 carbons, 5 nitrogens there. And it just went on and on, but it maintained the structure of selfies, these C's, CC double bonds, CO double bonds, and it looked correct, but it was just it was hallucinating. Now the second one was more concise, but it was less logical, and it actually had a chlorine atom in it. And the third one just had all carbons for NVIDIA. So again, it partly depends on the original model. I looked actually for the original Meta Llama 3, and it is trained on, and it knows about selfies, and it knows about smiles, these types of things in chemistry. So when you do these things, first you want to check on meta.ai if you're using Llama and see what it gives you. And then you go on to further fine tuning. So it's a work in progress, I would say, as far as using specific data sets. But the next step, actually, you could use retrieval augmented generation without having to do fine tune, and that might be a really good first step as well. So I pushed those up. Now, the three that I based mine off of, the Gradient AI, News Research, and then also NVIDIA, these are all top 10 on the current leaderboard of all models right now. And that's why I chose them, and some, based on familiarity with the specific brands there. And then, so just a heads up, is that the Stanford Medicine and HI conference is coming up. So it's their inaugural symposium of race health. It's co-hosted by Stanford Medicine and HI. It will explore AI's future in biomedicine and address critical issues concerning the technology's responsible development and use. Now, I've watched a number of either an interview, and they also had another conference. The key with this is what's practically being used in medical today with AI. So that was a huge differentiation compared to like a lot of the things you read in literature, and you kind of learn there. And in specific, HI, so the second one, if you've ever seen anything medical related and AI, you've probably seen a HI generated figures. They do really good reports, and they just do a really good job. Now, I want to end with this is basically this, as they say, this is this drug discovery paper, which I'll probably be featuring next week. It's just got a lot of good Gen AI. It's not specific for agentic workflows, but it's just kind of like, it's kind of a summary, and it's kind of like, this is the bleeding edge with the technology. So they say current AI methodologies often prioritize addressing the symptoms and effects of disease rather than delving into the underlying causes. Unraveling the causative pathways and revealing genetic predispositions holds the potential to empower interventions and even reverse disease progression. In this vein, it is anticipated that seasoned AI experts will play a pivotal role, such as you or I or anybody listening to this, in designing DL models or deep learning models that are capable of effectively modeling diseases, thereby improving outputs, particularly in toxicity profiles, to mitigate the longstanding challenge of late-stage failures in clinical trials. So I actually read this quote before, and I based a poll on this causative pathways, genetic predispositions. Can Gen AI for cancer drug discovery be improved by cost or speed? These types of factors as well. So I would definitely recommend that. This is number 12. I'll have these up. Now, if you're trying to access the slides, everything's on GitHub, okay? Trying to access these models here, they're actually up there. I pushed them up to Hugging Face. And again, these are based on Llama 3, 8 billion. They were fine-tuned again by one of these three. And then I fine-tuned again on my specific data set as well. So yeah, if you're looking for slides, GitHub, and then obviously YouTube will have the discussion. That's what you're looking for. Are there any questions? And I appreciate everybody coming on. I'll put in so feel free to put it in the chat as well. And then if you came a little bit later, or if you missed a slide, let me know. If we have a question, we could go back to that as well. And this will all likely continue pretty well. Like I said, there was an NVIDIA somebody that works a connection of mine, and she said that AI agents are here, basically. And she cited the work with Hippocratic AI, and based on other publications we've seen with the ChemCrow, the LIAM group, and then also LAMM-MIT is another group that's associated with MIT. I've seen two papers. One was Agentic, and then the other one was kind of this predicting trying to generate proteins that have a specific pull strength, something that's more challenging than, say, like if it had a specific PI or isoelectric point, those types of things. So what stands out here is basically, a lot of the things, like with Andrew, he's an expert too. And, definitely with this slide is basically, when Andrew talks about this, as far as what jobs will people have in the future, it'll be more like you're task analyzing things. So humans, for the longest time, in my projection, will still be the most autonomous, out of all of us, which is good. And it's just the tasks will vary. So say if it takes a half an hour to do something that the computer's busy with, and then a human just does it faster, right? And it's not always going to be the case where, say, somebody gets on and they're just, exactly what the human should be doing. But it is the case that knowledge workers like you and I, or other people listening to this discussion, we will have to, our tasks will get realigned for sure. And our different kind of, the tasks that we do every day will be different. And this is portrayed in other areas too. Any questions?
Hey, Kevin, how are you?
Good.
So this concept of asking an AI agent to go out and research something, is that going to be something different than just feeding an AI agent a Google search?
Yeah, so it's a higher level. So basically, you're going to have different agents that do different things. And even on this first page I put with other types of machine learning in the lower right-hand corner too, that's currently what's being worked on too to make it better. But groups, especially this ChemCrow paper that I did last week with the LIAM researchers, they had 18 tools that were able to augment, whatever was generated from ChatGPT to get it did better than ChatGPT alone. Yeah, so you're going to see a lot of tools, associated with it. And say if there's specific small machine learning models that just do better than today's LLMs for whatever reason. Obviously, when you get huge in LLMs, they slow down. So if it's a specific task that's faster for regression model or, classification or these types of things, just do it there. But yeah, that's the way that Andrew's describing it, is just give it more time at this specific stage. As far as that's how we think of these workflows, as it goes and, performs more complex tasks that, instead of getting the answer right away from Meta AI or ChatGPT or Hugging Face or Hugging Chat, that it's going to take some time, at least now, to get your output.
Sounds pretty cool. I mean, it's most of these generative AIs, well, they started out being trained on all of the internet up to some point in time. And then, which is not very recent. The most recent stuff with like ChatGPT 4 allows you to hand feed it a pile of information to use in conjunction with its conversant capability. So there's now people are moving towards setting up pre-trained subdomains, I guess, where you can start a generative AI and say, oh, and then pick up this expert module and add it to the process. I was just trying to wonder what telling an AI to go research something, how that would be different than basically just doing a Google search and giving it the top 1,000 hits. And
Yeah, I think it's just
absorb that or something.
Yeah, so say for instance, like if the whole key with LLMs and where everything's headed is if you give it a sentence or two, like can it actually perform that task, right? So there's certain things that GPT-4 or ChatGPT-4, can't, or Meta.ai can't, So especially on the research side, where you pretty much can't trust I mean, for book reports and stuff like that with ChatGPT or Meta AI, it's okay. But for specific things like return the specific molecule to me, even if it was trained on it, it has to be pointed to a direct source. So that's why Andrew said here is that if you're looking forward to running these future models on your application, you might already be able to get similar performance with this agentic reasoning. So it goes into depth, and I didn't include it in this one, but there's LangChain demos that I've run, and they basically set up the different agents. So say if in one case it's perfectly fine to just run the LLM, in one case, but another case you need to do, and this is where the advanced workflow comes in, you need to do these other like book reports or get pointed to a specific PDF. So it's just higher and higher levels of automations for more complex tasks that, again, always going back to that user prompt, do this in a sentence or two, and that's what the new technology enables. Any other?
So one other fallback on that is people are pushing the Gen AI to be, I don't know what the term would be, almost forward looking. So right now they're all set up where you feed it information, then you ask it questions, but it never asks you questions. So there's work being done to try to get these Gen AIs to be actually conversant as opposed to simulating conversation.
Yeah, as far as the
I
back,
wonder if that would help.
I covered some of this a little bit before. So there's Andrej Karpathy. He's another one to follow, especially like on, his seminars on YouTube, is that, there's certain cases if you ask it, like, who is the mother of Tom Cruise? And they'll say whoever. And you say that person's name, who is the son of this mother. Happy Mother's Day, by the way, on Sunday. Then, it has a hard time answering that thing, even though. So it gets into explainability. That's a factor with transformers because basically they have nonlinear layers, and as opposed to like tensor networks or other types of more direct ways of looking at answers. So yeah, I can't think of a case where it's actually asking you a question next, because usually we want the computers to do something for us, but it does sometimes actually in Meta AI and ChatGPT, it will ask for a clarification. If it's not sure, if it's not sure of something, it will say, is this what you mean? Or could you be more specific? Sometimes it will say that.
Yeah, it keeps getting scarier and scarier every day. I've seen some medical presentations which are very impressive.
Yeah, it's nothing new. Like even going back to late 2023 with the LIAM researchers, it's LIAM, and it's this ChemCrow thing. Is they just wanted to start off with something like, we have a prompt, like we just in a sentence or two, this is what we want, and even they can add in, it needs to cost this much or it needs to do that. And they included like 15 examples of the different prompts that they had and like the outputs that they received as far as the chemicals. But it went all the way into, creating it with IBM's Robo reaction. And it has these safeguards in place too. But it's just, when I read this, so it was Renee Yao's post from NVIDIA. One of the comments is they said it's just the natural evolution of AI, as far as it's more automation, making our jobs easier in some sense, but we're just going to interact with computers. This is the human AI team in a different way. So jobs are going to change and tasks are going to change. But, still with humans being the most autonomous. Any other questions? Anybody else that hopped on a little bit later? And, it just keeps coming out as far as the news, because this specific article, so this was on CNBC. Generative AI will be designing new drugs all on its own in the future. Like we always have to point it to certain things, and you have to give it a specific task. And what comes to mind is this: the LAMM-MIT researchers, who's done this. They say, give me a protein that has this mechanical pulling strength, and then it generates that. And they found it. There R squared, if you're familiar with graphing things like on a linear regression, was about 0.4. So it wasn't great, but it was better than their competitors, about 0.1. So as with anything, I think it always has to be like really specific to what you need done. And, you know, the work that's being done with LangChain and, you know, basically if you have multiple different agents and these types of things, is that, you know, there's still more work to go there to have it more seamless. But other groups have definitely done this before, you know, as far as getting their publication out, explaining what they did, you know, LAMM-MIT as well. And it doesn't take much. Like if you watch, I think the biggest one that kind of stuck out in my mind is I watched part of the NVIDIA GTC. That was probably four weeks ago, like a month ago. And they talked about these types of things and, you know, software talking to software. And, you know, especially in the Bay Area, it's definitely a topic of, you know, that people talk about. And then anybody else that we haven't heard from? So, you know, it's really like if you were to do different types of software, you know, charts like this or graphs showing what exactly is going on, it's just to a higher degree, right? Because hardware enabled deep learning back in 2000, right? And after 2000, more like. And then, you know, I or whoever could run good PyTorch or TensorFlow workflows in, you know, 2015, 2016, and they kept developing too. So, but it was the hardware that enabled these things. And especially, he said, with long-term memory, it'll be a whole new application of it all that, you know, being able to have these personal assistants or agents or, you know, orchestrating environments, you know, recall things a lot more in depth, as opposed to sometimes you go onto some of the other chat protocols and, you know, it doesn't, you know, there's not much memory there. But he said in specific, this one will enable a lot more on, you know, as far as applications and usefulness. And obviously from the slide, a couple slides, planning and then the multi-agent collaboration, these are the parts that still need to develop more. So people spoke very highly. So this is Harrison right here. And there was a more recent chat with him, kind of like an interview, an hour long. This was just 8 minutes. Him talking to another researcher and basically say, you know, there's so much in store. There's called LangSmith as well. Now, other people in specific, this LangGraph is highly talked about because it allows you to see, you know, to graph out basically the different components of the user, the output, you know, the different agents, these types of things. And I did experiment with some of these demos and I was able to get through most of them. And it's nice because a lot of, especially with retrieval, is you'll get these answers back that actually can cite the source, as opposed to, you know, a typical LLM that's hallucinating or, you know, just keeps going on and on. Without giving a concise answer. So when you start to use RAG, it's retrieval augmented generation, what they mention here is that you tend to get a lot more smaller or shorter answers. They're a lot more concise. And of course, if you pointed it to a certain source, then, you know, you have that source on hand. It's not like a dream, you know, like the software dreaming up these responses. And it's a compressed, so if an LLM trains on 10 trillion or 10 terabytes of data, and it compresses it down to like 150 gigabytes for like a Llama 3 70 billion parameter, then you're not keeping all that information. But especially in agentic workflows too, keeping this retrieval part as another step to augment the original LLM to get a more accurate answer for research purposes has been key. And I've shown this a number of times using RAG, that it just gives a lot shorter answer. And it's like literally that sentence that I was asking about, it just tells straight from the sentence without, you know, these excess verbose kind of answers. And, you know, Gen AI in oncology is already a huge thing on its own. And again, I'll probably be, there's probably at least 6 or 8 sources that use Gen AI with oncology or cancer. but I had a hard time pinpointing what types of models they were using, because when they start making things like with their own, like it's hard to tell if they use a 1.3 billion LLM or parameter LLM. Like, is that a transformer? Is that BERT? Or, it was hard to find. So anyways, I think for next week, I'll be taking a deeper dive into these types of things, because there's a good amount of research that's been done in drug discovery and Gen AI, and I've only shown two. So this is the diffusion you probably hear about, and this is transformer, which makes up Llama, this kind of architecture, like the base of it. It also makes up GPT as well. But they listed a number of other ones that are considered Gen AI. But I would say diffusion, transformer, they're kind of like one or two, maybe transformer one as far as number of applications. But it's a very established field, I would say. And they called this unleashing the power of generative AI in drug discovery. Like there's enough research definitely to go around. And if you want to get more specific in what you're trying to do. And some of these, with the protein mechanical strength by the LAMM-MIT group, is that they put their notebooks up. So I designed 8 proteins on my own, right? That's based on that original code. And then I could further test them and, going through the motions until getting to that point of having a really good Gen AI model with these types of workflows. Yeah, so here we go. So Samuel says, using AI for experiments to develop new drugs was already expected. Could these AI also predict in the near future the types of organic reactions? I think, organic reactions of new drugs. The types of organic reactions of new drugs. So I'm guessing that you're talking about like sending instructions to like a robo reaction, like these are the specific conditions, I believe, or figuring out new reactions too. So I think that's a case in both of those. And if you want to come on or further clarify that, but yeah, it's like Gen AI or like LLMs, they can do a lot of things, but if you switch over to ChatGPT-4, it's really slow, right? And it's typically meant for kind of the better image generations and the more complex tasks. So I mostly use 3.5, and I'm upgraded to use GPT-4, but it's just too slow for a regular workflow. So for instance, if you have these different workflows in agents, having certain tools that can, predict types of these reactions, new drugs. But I think the takeaway that I got from it is basically starting off with a better 10,000. So this is just an example, but in stage 1 of early drug discovery, if you start off with better leads, your chances of getting a better medicine is better, right? Because you understand more about the compounds. And I'd say, and they did mention this in this big drug discovery today paper that I've been referencing, is that there needs to be more explainability as far as how you get specific molecules. But it seems like the industry is progressing well. But something like, tensor networks, other quantum inspired techniques that have been shown to work is a suitable, way to, develop LLMs that are more explainable, more controllable, a lot smaller in size, and maybe not, they're linear, but maybe not having the long range interactions like LLMs, like transformer based, but at least being explainable and having a lot better model to start off with smaller molecules. So that's a good project right there. And, in all these things, I see it, especially this year, kind of being up here. I don't know if anything will get to stage 2 as far as animal testing, these sorts of things. But when you're using large language models or these agentic workflows, is it enabling you to understand more about the molecule, the one molecule out of these 10,000? Why in specific is that a good lead? So I think a lot of things, especially with retrieval augmented generation or RAG, is pointing towards, say, okay, we have this really good data set that we want to base our 10K leads off of, refer everything here, and then it'll cite that source, just more powerful retrieval to augment the LLM. Now, you might say, especially if you're new to this whole thing, why do you need the LLM? You need the LLM for context. It was trained on, terabytes of data, and it picks up the minutiae of the words that I'm talking about. Or like if you were to say a sentence, is that positive connotation or negative? These types of things. So you need the LLM for context. But say if you do RAG or retrieval augmented generation, that can help with the specific and say, okay, now we have the context, or like this is the brain behind it, but now we need to point it in this specific article, and only base your answers based on that article. So I think that's already happening today, especially with the Drug Discovery Today paper, and then we're going to see a lot more of that too. Yeah, so it just depends. So the question is, who gets the patent produced by this AI, the researcher, developer, or the company? So if you look at a lot of these, a lot of them are based on the original LLMs, right? So LangChain, should be pretty open source, and as far as, linking up to different ML. But if you read Llama 3 community license, or if you read Apache 2, like Mistral is Apache 2, which is definitely open source, or MIT is very open source. Especially if you read, I read Apple's, they just don't want you to say like made with Apple, like it's just like you're starting an advertising campaign that says Apple on the specific product, maybe more for research and development. But they just released their open ELMs this week as well. But Llamas in specific says, you can make money off the use of the LLMs. And that's where a lot of the research is based on, are these models that took $100 million to train to get these parameters. And that's your starting point. So if you're coming from different parts of technology, I would definitely take a look at, Meta Llama 3 or Apple's new, they tend to be smaller, but open ELMs. I think they have a 3 billion, and there's a go into phones. So Apple might have the biggest application of LLMs now, just because they could get the LLM, like a tiny LLM, to fit on a phone. And then now it can at least run on a device that everybody has, or most people have. Okay, and let's see here. So another question. And the biggest challenge in drug development currently lies not so much in discovering chemical candidates, but rather in enhancing the efficacy in actual clinical trials. How can we leverage AI to address this issue, and what happens, what approaches are available? So if you're talking clinical trials, we're talking more like stage 3, and I don't think it's got to that point. So if you're talking efficacy and if you could be a little bit more specific too, because I don't know in specific what you're talking about, but by the time it gets to the clinical phase, can you use agentic workflows and LLMs and Gen AI? I would just need a little bit more info on that one. So it's a progressive thing, but I would definitely, the thing about this and all the research I've done over my 2 years is I always find more than I thought I could. And the reason why I keep going back to the, the generative AI, this drug discovery paper, is it's just very detailed as far as how exactly people have used, Gen AI to further everything. And in specific, so if you're asking about the clinical trials in Gen AI, I would definitely research that too, to kind of see what people are using. Is it R&D? How far has it gone? Those types of things. And the closer that you get to the actual drug, the more scrutinized the technology, will be. But I would say, compared to other different medical areas, if you have a medical diagnostic that it's like, you're relying on this computer software, this AI software, and you can't interpret what it's doing, that's going to be probably like one of the harder cases, right? But drug discovery in the early stages of saying like creating 10,000 better compounds that are better than the original ones, so you end up with a better one, I don't think that's as much. But again, as you keep going down and you keep relying on advanced forms of AI, obviously that's an FDA thing.
So Kevin, relative to drug discovery, have you heard anybody using GraphRag?
Graph rag, I'm not sure on that one.
So graph refers to a graph database, which has an innate ability to encode knowledge, and somehow it's married to RAG to address issues like you were talking about before, where you get an answer to a question, but then it loses a connectivity to something else in the context. That's where the graph kicks in, and it has a graph to either trace forward or backstep on to find those connections, so it can answer those questions. I'm wondering if how that would affect drug discovery.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely worth researching. I know they use, GRNs for, as part of Gen AI. But, if RAG is an effective tool because you don't have to retrain, then, that's probably something that, other people have thought of.
Cool.
Yeah, any other questions? Anybody that we haven't heard from? And I would definitely say, because, the biggest types of news besides the AI agents is just all of this going through and where does it all fit? And if you're worried, in specific what you'll be doing in the future, I would really start researching AI and specifically using the chatbots or these AI agents. Some refer to themselves as AI agents, ChatGPT, Meta AI, and huggingface.chat or .co or huggingchat.co. That's really good for the Hugging Face specific things like the code, their transformers and accelerator, but it's kind of slow. Like it's based on a model it's inferencing slow, right? It's just slow. But yeah, that's the best thing you can do because you're interacting with these $100 million plus, large language models as a starting point, and you can ask ChatGPT all these types of questions. But I see that even being a more pronounced part of everybody's workflow, and especially if you're using, just GPT for GPT-5 for drug discovery purposes, or any of these other types of things, is that you have to get used to prompting. So like how to give it good information, give it direct information, and it's getting better, at understanding responses. But sometimes if you ask it like to create this image with just a plain white background, like on Meta, I kept getting different shadings in the back, and I couldn't use it because unless I fill it in with white, But I would say that's the biggest thing, because of my friends and colleagues that I talk to, they say they use meta.ai on Facebook and they didn't have much luck. And I remember for me specifically, you have to get used to asking it direct questions, and you don't want to keep going on, right? And at least to start with, I just start off with just single sentences. And then if you have good luck with that, go up to 2 sentences. And it's the basis, because all these text generation models that generate new text, based on some output, or based on some input, is that that text could be represented as an amino acid, like A for alanine, or K for lysine, or whatever. So it's important to be able to use it for general. So then when you're forced, in work to now use AI models like LLMs and these types of workflows, agentic workflows, you have a better idea what you're doing, right? But there is a learning curve. And some people said you could just be a prompt engineer, like basically using other types of software to create better and better prompts to give to the LLMs so that you get these better answers. So I think that's still a job, but figure with more complex tasks, with RAG and these other types of things, that maybe not as big of a field as some thought it would be. And then any other questions? So as far as like what's coming up ahead here is you're going to see a lot more, I think, on the development side of LangChain. One I didn't mention is Llama Index. So there's a lot of these kind of like Llama Index that are built around Meta Llama. And it's open source basically. You're just supposed to say built with Meta Llama 3 and then put a specific note into your model card. And then your license is obviously Llama 3 open community license, right? But beyond that, just use it for good purposes. And it's a very open community, and they built medical chatbots, which they're probably going to switch into Aegis now, based on Llama 2. And, if you look at the leaderboard now, like I showed you with NVIDIA, the other two as well, Hermes 1 and Gradient is, they're the original Llama 3, say the 8 billion, you have that. And now people are fine tuning it based on some question answer data set. And then I just fine tuned it on my molecular instructions. And you don't want to keep fine tuning it on your specific data set because you can overfit. And similarly, if you fine tune on a specific data set and then RAG, so you go to augment the output, you keep going back and forth, you could break the model, or it's called model collapse. So there's certain things you don't want to do. But however, they did say if you have these different LLMs talking to each other, like ChatGPT, Meta.ai, you feed the output into the input of another. They say that's actually kind of appropriate as far as getting places in research. But you still want to keep in mind what you're doing, because if you keep introducing the same data, it's just going to memorize it. So then if you just change the answer, and it's just, connecting the dots instead of generalizing in the line, then, you're losing the effect of machine learning, right? Which is what Gen AI is based on. So yeah, it's an exciting field, and it's good to see, people, because I still want to incorporate all this tensor network stuff into these models to make them faster, a lot less size, more explainable, more controllable. And I got all these projects, piling up. And there's other types of quantum inspired machine learning that I focused on too, that I want to bring too, but only the stuff that's efficient, practical, better, that we're more so finding in tensor networks. So, but I think that'll make everything a lot interesting too. And if you have any specific questions, I know a lot of people get hung up on Hugging Face. You go there and you see all these buttons, and it seems out of control. It's just focus on text generation, right? Because that's where the bulk of this is the Llama 3, this is the Apple Open ELMs, and it's very simple. Like you input text and you output text, and that text that's output was generated. Right? It wasn't like, it's not like a memorized answer. So I would start with that. They have a number of models. Up on my GitHub, I've done a bunch of these too. So, but if you want something that's fast, just go straight to RAG, like find a good LLM base model. And then I put up previous models myself. I think it's GitHub Sakil, SAKIL 786 has a model up. And it works good, right? So RAG usually works good. I think you run into less problems using retrieval augmented as opposed to fine tuning if you're not sure what you're doing. And especially you don't want to retrain the model because Meta.ai spent millions of dollars to do that. You just want to fine tune it, but you can retrain it if you want to. Any other questions? And as far as who else to follow, definitely. So I did this last week. It's Andrej Karpathy. It's Andrej. If you get that far, you'll probably get his last name too. And Andrew Ng. If you search for any of these topics, they're pretty well being researched. So agentic workflows, fine tuning, RAG, and you'll have RAG agentic workflows and using different combinations of these too. But the researcher's dilemma right now is, you're not going to get too far just going to ChatGPT or, Meta.ai and doing specific research because it's it's not trained for that. It's trained like on a bunch of stuff. And I had a case, it was the UC Irvine heart disease data set. And even then it wasn't, it was trained on it initially, Meta.ai, but when I used RAG to point directly to it, it gave a lot shorter one sentence answer the question. The other one started to look into Meta.ai, started to look into other folders and directories that weren't related to that answer. And it actually pulled up other doctors in the main directory that it wasn't related to that answer. So that kind of gives you a hint, as far as what to do, between all these things. And if you have some free time, I would definitely research the LangChain. So LangChain is the main, and they have LangSmith, which I'm a little less familiar with, but they're talking about a lot. LangGraph is actually under LangChain, but it gets things in graph mode. And Llama Index, CrewAI. But the one I hear the most about is LangChain, like that being based off that, if you want to set up these, agentic workflows. Any other questions? So feel free to put it in the chat, or you can come on, or video or audio too. And if you join late, definitely check. Everything is basically on GitHub, so that's the central spot. So it's Kevin Kawchak, no spaces, and it'll say medical something. So that's where you could find all the presentations, all the code, all the notebooks, all that type of stuff. And a lot of, I usually refer back to original notebooks, or say these 3 fine tunings I did this week, those original ones too. And you just got to find something, that works for you, and just don't give up. And when you get finished with one project, just get off to another one. So it's typically how it goes. Awesome. So I appreciate everybody coming on. And yeah, this has been, let's see here, episode 134 for Thursday, May 9th, 2024. And I'll get more into the cancer kind of stuff. I still have to set up the framework with drug discovery, Gen AI, the agentic workflows, and that should be coming pretty soon. I appreciate everybody coming on, and have a good rest of the night, and have a good productive weekend too. Take care.